Hi, I'm Gary, and this is EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. And on the show today, we'll be looking at why your EV won't do the range the adverts say it will. This season of the podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. Our main topic of discussion today is range. A recent BBC Morning Live segment highlighted a Mustang Mach-E owner who was extremely unhappy with his car because it wouldn't do the range he was told it would do when he bought it. The official range was 610 kilometres or 320 miles, and he was getting around 260 miles maximum, fewer than that in winter. Now, he purchased the car so that he could do the trip to see grandkids in Gretna, 95 miles away, giving a round trip of 190 miles in total. But in midwinter, he arrived at Gretna with around 20 miles left. So, what went wrong? Was he sold a duff car? Why was he getting such a low range in a car that he was told would do 320 miles? Well, this is a common issue, and it's one I hear being discussed in forums and social media posts on a regular basis. It highlights a fundamental issue with understanding range in electric cars. Today, I want to talk about what the issues are, why the range will rarely be what the advertising tells you, and how to work out what your actual range should be. But first, a bit of history. Before EVs, the standard associated with efficiency for petrol or diesel cars was fuel consumption. TV adverts, newspaper adverts, commercial advertising material used to always quote a miles per gallon figure, or if you're listening in Europe, a litres per 100 kilometre figure. This was meant to let the potential buyers know what the relative efficiency was of the vehicle. You'll notice that it didn't give any indication of how the figure varied across the year. You'll also notice that it didn't give any indication of what the range was on the car. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee that the vast majority of ICE car drivers have absolutely no idea how big their fuel tank is. Even if they did, it would probably be a figure in litres, not gallons, which they picked up from seeing how much they put in at the last refill. So the efficiency is in miles per gallon and the fuel tank is in litres. Yay for the metric system in the UK. Consequently, nobody knew how far their car would go on a tank full of fuel. To find out, you had to get the car, fill it with fuel, drive it, and then you refilled it, and you drove it again, and then you refilled it, etc. Each time you refilled it, the range you had would be a bit different. Perhaps you'd done a lot of round town driving this time. Perhaps you'd done a lot of motorway driving. Either way, you weren't getting anywhere near what the official figures were showing, and your range was all over the place. Regardless of this, how far you could travel was not a problem. In fact, and I've told you before on this program, back in the 1980s, my father's Jaguar XJ6 had two 10-gallon fuel tanks, and it averaged 12 miles per gallon, so it could travel 240 miles between refueling stops maximum. I saw a recent post on LinkedIn that showed a 1973 RS 3100 Capri, which had a 255-mile range on a 13-gallon tank. Now, these figures are lower than a lot of EVs currently available to buy, including the Ford Mach-E I talked about at the top of the show. So we're now in the situation where electric cars are becoming more and more mainstream. Approximately 1 in 4 cars sold in the UK this year were electric. And now it seems that range figures are both important to know and crucial to be accurate. But that's not how it works. All the range figure gives you is an approximation to be used as a comparison figure, just like the fossil fuel efficiency figures. The data that always get quoted are the WLTP figures. This is the Worldwide Harmonized Light Vehicle Test Procedure. It's a simplified way of comparing different sorts of vehicles over the same sets of conditions. The test itself is designed to simulate an average car journey, and it takes place on a dynamometer, or commonly known as a rolling road. The test journey includes phases for acceleration, braking when the vehicle is stationary, and other items to be taken into account are rolling resistance, air resistance, different engine and gearbox combinations, and optional equipment. Generally, vehicle testers will examine the lightest and heaviest variant of any given model, then apply a mathematical formula to determine the consumption figures for the rest of the range. But the key to remember on this is that testing takes place over a relatively small driving distance and at a standard temperature. Tests are carried out at speeds from 29 miles an hour up to 81 miles an hour, but only over a rolling distance of 14 miles in total on a test that takes 30 minutes to carry out. And what this means is that very little, if any, relationship to real-world figures exists. And the reason for this is because it's not meant to be used for real-world values. It's meant to be used for comparison purposes only. And we'll come back to this a little later. The key thing to remember here is that ICE cars are the same. You go a lower distance on a fuel tank in winter. This is especially true if you have a diesel vehicle that's generally doing shorter journeys, such as, the school run. The diesel engine takes a while to get warm and it's less efficient while it's happening. And if you're doing short trips regularly, you'll be A, using more fuel, and B, kicking out more particulates and toxins as the engine warms up to peak efficiency. By then, a lot of the shorter journeys, like the school run, will have finished. You also don't get the mile per gallon rating you were promised on the car for exactly the same reason you don't get the WLTP figure, because the tests don't reflect real-world driving. As with fuel efficiency in ICE cars, your range depends to a very significant degree on your driving style. If you have the proverbial heavy right foot, it's going to be very easy to both increase your fuel consumption in an ICE car and lower your range in an electric vehicle. There is a motoring journalist who can be seen lurking around the LinkedIn comments of four-time Guinness World Record holder Kevin Booker. He has one simple refrain that he repeats pretty much ad nauseum. Your EV range drops dramatically when you start to do motorway speeds. The implication, of course, is that EVs are no good for motorways. But what he always tends to omit from this little refrain is the words, and ICE cars do too, as in, EVs and ICE car range drops dramatically when you do motorway speeds. The amount of energy needed to push a car forward is proportional to the square of the speed at which you're going. Thus, energy is directly related to fuel consumption. Higher speed equals more energy equals more fuel consumption equals shorter range. This means that, for example, a diesel car travelling at 55 miles an hour might have a fuel efficiency of 55 miles per gallon. But if you increase that speed to 75 miles per hour, that efficiency will drop to around 37 miles per gallon. Likewise, for a car such as a Tesla Model 3, your range at 55 miles per hour might be 364 miles, but if you do the same journey at 80 miles an hour, your range will be around 230 miles, 238 miles even. Now, it's just physics. So yes, while travelling at a slightly higher speed, you can expect on certain parts of the German Autobahn, your range will drop quickly in an EV. It will also drop in any car regardless of fuel type. If I go back to our Mark E driver, who was the subject of the BBC article, it's worth noting that in the report, he was seen travelling in lane 3 of the motorway. In other words, he was travelling the lane that encourages the kind of speed that would decrease his efficiency. It's worth remembering that at speeds such as this, big increases in speed from, say, 60 miles an hour to 70 miles an hour don't create huge differences in journey times. There's a famous graphic that Rory Sutherland, an ad exec from Ogilvy, shows from time to time, which indicates that travelling at 60 miles an hour will let you cover 10 miles in 10 minutes. But if you travel at 70 miles an hour, you'll cover the same 10 miles in only 90 seconds fewer. Is that extra 90 seconds worth destroying your fuel efficiency for? Now, while we're talking about Kevin Booker, as we were, he holds a number of world records for distance and efficiency driving. The one that I always found the most interesting is that he travelled from Land's End to John O'Groats, a distance of over 570 miles in a Ford Marquis electric vehicle, the one around which this whole discussion evolved. And he did all of this with one single charge stop. That's right, the full length of the UK with one stop to charge, and that's pretty much twice the WLTP range specified on the vehicle. So how did he do it? Well, you can listen to the whole episode in the archive for more details, but basically, it's a combination of careful driving style, correct setup of the car's software with things like eco mode and regenerative braking set up correctly, as well as using the tyres that are most suited to the job. Kevin likes to go for the smaller tyres, such as the 19-inch rims rather than the 21 or 21-inch rims that come with many cars. It seems like a small difference, but it all plays into rolling resistance, and that plays into efficiency, which plays into range. So how do you know what your real range is going to be if you're looking to buy a new or second-hand EV. The easiest way is to consult the EV database at evdatabase.org. It has realistic ranges for all electric vehicles split into summer and winter ranges for both city, combined, and highway driving. My current car, the Polestar 278 kWh, has, according to the EV database, a range that varies from 175 miles on the highway in winter to 350 miles around town in summer. Knowing that, I can make a respectable guess at how far I can actually drive on a given journey according to the figures. What the EV database will also give you are some actual consumption figures compared to WLTP data. For the Polestar 2, for example, the WLTP consumption figure is 256 watt-hours per mile, which is about 3.9 miles per kilowatt-hour. But the EV database consumption figures are closer to 3.2 miles per kilowatt-hour. And on a 75 kilowatt-hour vehicle, that difference in range is 52 miles. So check them out for your car or potential car, link in the show notes. So you've worked out that buying a car and using the WLTP range as your definitive guide for how far the car will go is probably a mistake. And we've worked out that the difference in actual range and stated range under WLTP is also something that happens to ICE cars. And we've worked out that WLTP is a comparative measure, not an actual measure. It's used to give an indication of efficiency and rate difference between two cars, not actual empirical values. So is it a conspiracy? Well, no. As I just mentioned, the WLTP ranges are meant as comparative values, not absolute values. If you see a car with a WLTP range of, say, 320 miles and another with a range of 400 miles, you know that the second one is a longer range car. As these are only comparative values, it doesn't mean you'll be able to actually do 400 miles of range out of that car, although you certainly might be able to, as Kevin Booker has illustrated on numerous occasions. But it does mean that under similar conditions, you'll get a higher range than the car with the WLTP range of 320 miles. Now, if range is important to you when looking at an EV, the best thing to do is not look at the actual range figures, but look at the efficiency figures for the vehicle. Some figures are respectable. The old Hyundai Ioniq 28 kilowatt-hour or 38 kilowatt-hour wind knife cars used to easily get over 5 miles per kilowatt-hour without trying. This gave good distance, even with a small battery, whereas something like the Audi e-tron SUV might not get anywhere near that, even with a bigger battery. Generally, you're looking for the most efficient vehicle, not necessarily the one with the biggest battery. And the reason this becomes important is because if you go for the longest range, that depends on efficiency and battery size. It's relatively easy to give an inefficient car a long range by sticking a large battery in there. I'm looking at you, 2025 GMC Sierra EV extended range with over 204 kilowatt hours of battery. But once the efficiency starts to drop, as it will in winter or when towing, or if it's raining, the range will start to fall away very quickly. Once you know and understand this, WLTP starts to become a useful measure to help you understand potential range differences between cars. But you certainly shouldn't be using it for actual range calculations. So how does this help if you're looking to buy an EV? If the range stated on the car's advertising is not a real-life range, how are you supposed to know how far the car will actually go? Well, there are two ways to do this, and we've already discussed one of them. Check the EV database for realistic figures. And the second way, do a test drive in the car. Now, I have a complete episode on test drives in the archives and what you should do, but in essence, one of the things you need to use a test drive for is to get some indication of the range of the car. If you only have a 20-minute test drive, ask the dealer to reset the trip meter and the efficiency settings and drive as you normally would. Then at the end of the test drive, make a note of the efficiency, either miles per kilowatt hour or kilowatt hours per 100 miles or per 100 kilometers, depending on where you're test driving and what the units of measure are, and ask the dealer for the battery size. Or better still, look it up online, because chances are they don't know what it is or they don't know what it is accurately. And remember, you want the usable battery, not the total battery. With the efficiency figures you've got, multiply that by the battery size to get an approximation of range. Now, it won't be perfect, but it will probably be more indicative of WLTP. If you're doing your test drive in winter, remember your summer range will be more. If you're doing your test drive in summer, remember your winter range will be less. If you get the vehicle for 48 hours or even 24 hours, try and do a long distance drive in it. Charge to 100%, take it somewhere on the motorway, and when your battery is at about 55% state of charge, i.e. you've used 45% of charge to get to where you are, turn around and head back home. In theory, the distance you covered there and back should be 90% of the range of your battery. Add what's left on the display, and that should be 100% of your range under those conditions. Again, longer in summer, shorter in winter. So that's WLTP, useful for comparison purposes, not so useful for planning purposes. However, if you do want to see what a good, efficient driver can do to the WLTP range, check out Kevin Booker's social media profiles. He regularly tests cars across the year and beats the WLTP range in most of them. But he's a magician, not a normal driver. It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with you listeners. Healthy soil is full of tiny organisms that produce energy as they break down organic matter. Milieu Brunel designed the Soli lamp, which uses this energy from microbes to create light. The outdoor lamp uses microbial fuel cells, which is a type of battery that converts the chemical energy released by microorganisms like those in soil or wastewater into electricity. Researchers said that they could be an alternative to fossil fuels, powering everything from biosensors to desalination plants, and in labs they've powered small fans, LEDs and calculators. Scaling up this electricity source is still a challenge, but it produces relatively low power and it isn't yet cost competitive. Brunel hopes her work will inspire people to better connect with and respect the environment. Another one to keep an eye out for. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. See what charge points are available right now with live availability and unrivaled UK charge point coverage at your fingertips. Pay at thousands of charge points within the app or with the ZapMap charging card. Join over 1 million EV drivers, download ZapMap and charge with confidence. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's show. If you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms or other general messages to pass on to me, I can be reached at info@evmusings.com. On the socials, I'm on Blue Sky at evmusings.bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram at evmusings, where I post short videos and podcast extracts regularly. Why not follow me there? Thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon on a monthly basis and through coffee.com on an ad hoc one. If you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to coffee.com/evmusings and you can do just that. ko-fi.com/evmusings. Takes Apple Pay too. Regular listeners will know about my 2 books, So You've Gone Electric and So You've Gone Renewable. They're 99p each or equivalent, and you can get them on Amazon. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as links to my regular EV Musings newsletter and associated articles. Now, I know if you're listening, you're probably driving or walking or jogging now, but if you can remember and you enjoyed this episode, drop a review in iTunes, please. It really helps me out. Thanks. If you're watching on the YouTube, nice subscribe and maybe a like would also be very helpful. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you. Why not let me know you've got to this point by messaging me at musingsev.bsky.social with the words WLTP, an FLA, not a TLA. Is that okay? Hashtag, if you know, you know, nothing else. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. We know he's been quite quiet again this week. I'm hoping he's going to be back next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.